Hi everyone. So Mark kind of said a bit than I could. I'm here today to talk about Windows detection engineering, specifically different to just writing detections, and we'll have a bit about ELK at the end. But I'm Dan Nash. Some of you know me, some of you don't. Anyway, there's more about me. So I'm part of the security engineering team at Sophos. After working with Splunk for ESA Security with Harry. I used to be much more a part of NUSEC than I am now. And it's great to see everyone here at their event. It really is fantastic that there's such a great turnout, and there's been so many good talks. And I used to work on just detection logic. So that's essentially endpoint and network traces which are left behind, which allow us to see whether something's bad, and then we can react to it instead of finding out about it 8 months later when we're in the news. So I used to work on just the actual logic itself, and since joining Solis, I've discovered there's so much more to it than that. And I was privileged enough to attend Harry's talk earlier about UDA, and that does highlight a lot of it. So if you're watching this recorded, you should go onto the same channel and check that one out as well. But yeah, I'm going to start this off with enterprise security is hard, and as security engineers and as people on the defense, we're often on the back foot, or if we don't prepare, we're often on the back foot. And I mean this in two real ways. So first, technically, modern enterprises are quite specialized and will suffer different threats. So for instance, businesses which work a lot over email, and then businesses who sell a lot will come under phishing, will come under fake CEO threats, while software vendors will come under attack from people looking to hijack supply chains and so on and so forth. And all of these require different detection mechanisms and different protections and all sorts of things. And even in one business, different silos within the business or different departments will face entirely different threats as well. So if you're a security engineer trying to deal with all this, that's a lot of different things you need to consider. And even in the same departments and even in the same processes, different platforms, so Linux, Windows, and old mainframes and Mac all require, again, all work slightly differently, and will require different protections again, which means more staff who are the subject matter expert in it, which means collaboration necessary, so schedules have to line up, and it's a lot of drama and it's a lot of work. And socially as well, and security is a cost center. I mean, it's Sophos' business to secure other people, but internally it's still a cost, and still a cost we have to justify. And I mean, why do much security when few security do trick, I guess? If there's no clear indicator that taking the cheaper option is going to damage you or make you less money in the future, then why not do that? A lot of risk, which is expensive or inconvenient to mitigate, can be accepted, and which can lead to a lot of technical debt. So for security engineers, we do see a lot of fatalism when we suggest suggest more extensive protection measures, or oh, we're going to get breached anyway, so it doesn't matter, or why buy this product if there's no real point. And then a lot of less so now because it's in the news literally every single day, but it's not going to happen to us. So they're not going to pick on us or a small company, or they're not going to see this, or this is just a dev network. We're don't worry about it. And again, with that kind of technical debt, security hygiene is a major marketing problem, because it's very easy to say, oh yeah, I've got AI, I've got this cool new thing which is going to capture all the threats, and I'm just going to save you loads of money in your SOC. But if you actually want if you were to pitch, say, okay, I'm going to go back and make sure that all of our that everything's auditable and everything's easy to follow, and that whenever our security team leaves, someone else will be able to take over, or if we bring a specialist in, it'll be easy to understand. There's a bit less buy-in for that because there's no real tangible benefit unless you really need it. So yeah, and there's also, I read an interesting paper while researching this, why information security is hard, an economic perspective. It actually pitches the problem of enterprise security as a problem of perverse incentives. So the people who are controlling the money don't really have the same motivations as someone who wants to keep data secure. And that this kind of conflict of, the right thing to do would be to do everything we can to keep the data safe, and that's going to cost us too much money, is going to forever be at play. And until we actually fix that, there might be no real solution. So to combat this, I'm going to very quickly talk about use cases. So in enterprise security, we tend to manage the problem of endpoint and network security with a program called a SIEM, which is a security information and events management tool. Hope I got that right. Right here. But essentially, what what we try to do in enterprise is gather all of these logs into one place and then run logic against them to see if there are things we know are bad behavior happening. Because like we can't look at every individual endpoint and every individual log file to see if bad stuff is going on. So, and inside this same tool, we will break up security problems as use cases. Very briefly, there's a lot to be said about this topic. So, if you know much about it, there'll probably be some stuff that you know what's going on here. But essentially saying to people, let's just like fix the security of the enterprise doesn't really work. And then because there's no direction, there's no time scale, how long will it take? We don't know. How many people you need? We don't know. Are we secure yet? We don't know. So like, if this project takes months or even years, it's kind of hard to keep buying there because like someone's paying you to secure all this stuff. And when you said, oh yeah, I'm just going to secure it all, and then a year later, it's still not all secure. It's kind of like, well, what work are you doing and where? So a use case is generally used to refer to a specific condition or event, usually a specific threat to be detected or reported by a security tool. And generally, whenever security engineers talk about a use case, it'll go all the way from the high level attacker motivation. So who's targeting this and why? Like, is it a business critical asset? Is there data to be stolen? All the way down to the mitigation board. If we can't mitigate it, the detection of the indicator of compromise there. And generally, seeing as the purpose of a use case is to make these security issues addressable, it'll generally include a playbook for an analyst to follow as well. So once this is flagged up in your security tool of choice, whether that be Splunk or an ELK stack or whatever, then the analyst who's reading it and monitoring it can actually take an action from that to help resolve the issue, because although you can identify it and although you can detect it, you still need to, actually do something about it. And generally, we would use a framework to pick which use cases to do. So instead of, becoming the subject matter expert in literally everything in your enterprise, you can instead turn to people who are already, you can get a good inventory list of what you have and then say, okay, so which platforms do we have and have we covered the entire kill chain? So I take it you can't see this chart at the bottom, at the back? Okay, so essentially it goes from the start of the kill chain, so initial access to, near the start of the kill chain, from essentially as close to the start of the kill chain as we can do something about it, because reconnaissance and OSINT, we can't really, aside from good data hygiene, we can't really do much about that. But it goes all the way from initial access to command and control and exfiltration, collection, lateral movement, discovery, credential access, the defense evasion, and it'll give. So this is the MITRE ATT&CK framework in particular, and this will give a summary of each of the individual vulnerabilities, and that list goes way down, but it would never fit on a slide. So it'll give a summary of each individual vulnerability or each individual tactic used by attackers on each platform. And then following one of these, so anyone in their organization could go, okay, given enough time, how are we with all of these? With each of these boxes, what are we doing to detect it and what are we doing to stop it? So that's a good way for you to change the problem of let's just fix the security of our enterprise into here's how we're going to fix the security of our enterprise bit by bit. And we know exactly where we stand with each piece. And when something changes, so let's say we get new tech in, or we migrate the server, we can again reference this chart to say okay, where are we in terms of plugging the holes? And generally, the development of a use case, although there are tons of frameworks for developing them, and there's lots of different ideologies on what's the best way. Generally, it's something like this. So it starts off with an objective, what are you trying to do? Stop getting hacked usually. Then threat. So what's the threat of happening? What's the risk here? So who and stakeholders, who's responsible not only for actively working with that asset or with that part of the business, but then who would also be involved in the process of fixing it or the process of mitigating it, or if it's a data breach, who would be involved legally, so on. What data will we need to monitor and detect it? What logic would we need to filter out the events we don't want? And then we'd test that logic, and then we'd assign a priority to it. So and I initially found it quite weird the priority was at the end, because surely you'd assess the priority before you start development on it, and that way you can fix the hardest things first. But different vulnerabilities will have different issues with detecting them, and depending on how well or reliably you can detect them, it might have a different priority. So it does ultimately make sense to decide on how major an alert or an event is at the end. So I'm going to run through very briefly. There are some parts I skip over, and if anyone's super familiar with Windows internals or Kerberos specifically, you're going to be raging because this really doesn't cover the half of what it should. But it's a 30-minute slot, so that's okay. So essentially, the Kerberos attack is an attack on Windows Kerberos, which allows an attacker who already has an account on the domain to escalate their privileges to an account which owns a service. And generally, accounts which have services attached to them have higher privileges just because of the way enterprises work. I mean, like if you're running like a batch service, like generally you're not just going to be, like someone who works in sales or so on and so forth. So, but on the attack matrix, the MITRE attack framework I showed you earlier, that would come under credential access, which it's not like, it definitely does not need fixed if that's wrong. It does need fixed. It definitely isn't the most urgent thing to be fixed, of course, because it's not, like initial access. It's not open to the internet, but it certainly is a consideration if you're looking to look at the security of your organization in like a holistic way and actually make decisions about it. And the reason we don't want Kerberos thing is that, I talked about the service council of higher privileges, and Kerberos ticket logs are not stored by default. So unless we actively take it to our, at least in the 2016 server, they're not stored by default. I'm not sure if it's changed, but if you're not making an active effort to address this vulnerability, it might go completely unlogged. It might be it might go completely undetected, and that's not something you want. And ultimately, like the reason why you're hearing about this here and not on like a front page headline saying Windows is broken is that when an entire enterprise follows best practices. So, for instance, we only create services under managed service accounts, which have very, very strong passwords and are very, and are very safe and managed services in a very sensible way. Or we have, a strong password for the account we're creating the service on. Or we enable the AES Kerberos encryption, which isn't always done because I guess it's slower and it takes time, etc. So when all those best practices are followed, we don't have to detect this at all because it's not an issue, right? If someone, well, I'll go into how it works exactly in a second, but the point I'm trying to make here is that detections don't always have to be, okay, we've wrote a detection, we detect it all the time. It just has to lower the risk to the organization. So if the reality is that not all enterprises are perfect, then we should definitely write rules to detect what happens when like something slips up or policy isn't followed, or like and like an admin makes a fast fix, and then that fast fix stays there for 3 years, like things like that. So in order to understand Kerberos thing, we need to understand Kerberos. So who here knows how Kerberos works first? Yeah, that's so essentially Kerberos is a ticketing based authentication system, and this is good because it allows a single sign-on or aids single sign-on and stops you from just like sitting on the network and listening for like a client sending a password to the DC. And the most important thing is essentially the key distribution center contains two services: the authentication service, which you don't really care about, and the ticket granting service. So when I log in originally, or when I log into Windows and authenticate myself, I'll use the authentication service. Do I exist? Yes, am I on the domain? Fantastic. And then they'll give me a ticket granting ticket once I log in. And using this ticket granting ticket, I can then use that to ask the key distribution center for a service ticket for a particular service. And the interesting thing about this is that once the way the service ticket works is I then, as a client, I will take that to the network resource I'm accessing, or service, or resource or whatever. And the way they know that that is legitimate is that it's encrypted with their own secret. So, like, if I'm a network resource and I know my password's password, I just use my secret to decrypt the service ticket, and I know that that's a legitimate ticket because I can decrypt it and I can read it because it's using my secret. And the key distribution center issued that ticket, and I trust them, so ergo I trust this thing. But the issue with that is that it enables anyone who requests a service ticket to have access to that hash, or that secret, sorry. And that, in this case, is the hash. And with old assets, so anything before Windows Server 2008, I think, would use a very, very old RC4 implementation of the the encryption, which means that cracking them offline isn't particularly stressful, and like the margin of where we consider a crackable password goes down quite significantly. So this is although it is only a credential access, this is a very real issue, and it is something that we need to manage on a detection level as well. So essentially, how an attack would work would be we enumerate users who have servers, and we can do that with set SPN, we can do that with basic PowerShell. We can grab the hash from the service ticket when we request it using certain tools or Mimikatz or whatever. Then we can crack it offline away from obviously the AD is not going to hear about it if we crack it offline, because that's something we can do anywhere. And then voila, we've got credentials provided it's the password's weak enough. So how do we stop this? We can follow best practices, but that's not really a security strategy, as it is like a pie in the sky dream. So we're going to have to try and detect it, and then once we spot it, we can then take an action to secure it then, because software isn't perfect, right? So if we create our own environment with no noise, this is going to be easy to identify, and there are going to be, I'm going to show you how I built up to essentially having a curb roasting detection, but this isn't going to work realistically in an enterprise environment without some sort of change to it, because again, as I said, enterprises aren't perfect, and that is the battle we're dealing with, and that's fine. I mean, it's not I don't have to wait until everyone else does their jobs perfectly and before I can start improving security. So that's no problem. Generally, the things in an enterprise which will help searches like this is specifically with curb roasting. I had to think, service accounts, that they may use a third-party program to track and deal with the security of service accounts. So whenever we search for people requesting tickets, there's going to be a few accounts which come up an awful lot more. So if we had some kind of lookup or some kind of centralized repository for these accounts, we can filter them out. That's no problem. Again, if you've got an active purple team or a red team, I guess, I'm not sure I like the term purple team, but essentially internally at Sophos, we have a team which tests other departments and then uses that information to feed back to them and say, hey guys, this is what we need to be doing better as a group. This is what we need to be having this set up is bad, and then so on and so forth. So again, they're likely to be curb roasting, so we can filter these out. And a proper threshold for how many service tickets is too many, because if you've got quite a large AD, if you've got quite a large environment, there's going to be generally a lot of service tickets being used. So that will specify from person to person. So moving on quickly, so not sure how much time I've got left. Building a local testing environment.
You were 8 minutes, mate.
Thanks. So, hang on, what's happened to my slides? Okay, this isn't supposed to be animated, I got scared there. I thought I left the slide blank. But essentially, what we need to test this involves a domain controller with its own domain, a victim privileged account with a dodgy, easy to crack password. And the reason it has to be privileged is just so we can demonstrate that this can be used for credential access for privilege escalation. An improperly registered service tied to the victim account with the poor password that we shouldn't do, but that's fine. And then on the attacker side, we're going to need a single Windows client connected to that AD domain, a client account, preferably unprivileged, again to demonstrate the privilege escalation aspect to it. Oh, yep, there we go. That says it there. So, how on earth do we do this? Well, I mean, setting up locally on your own box is preferable, because I mean, I don't know how many of you are students, but certainly as a student, I wouldn't be able to afford AWS or anything like that. So, Windows images are freely available as evaluation copies. I'm pretty sure this includes all the new server ones as well. It does go back quite a while, so you can get a copy of Windows 7, or even Vista to test the per encryption thing I was talking about. So essentially, once you have your two images, just spin them up and set them up, stick them on the same internal network. And and as far as setting them up goes, I'm quite limited in time here, and there's a lot of people who know a lot more about ID than I do, who can tell you the exact best practice way to do things and the reason why things are. So again, I was going to stick the whole link in, but if you literally Google setting up an Active Directory lab part 1, that's the first result. And then if you're looking for home lab guides which specifically point to curb roasting and about setting up massive environments which simulate real service traffic and that sort of thing, so you can test an actual detection, which takes a lot of time. you can go to the Late Red blog, which is run by MyExploit 2600 and Sub EAX, who ran a great workshop on this last SteelCon last year, and so shout out to those guys. And Seth's X blog on Pentest Home Lab, which I followed myself, which is a great resource. There's a few really good things on that site. So again, assuming we've set it up to use it, so we need to find the tools. So again, curb roasting is literally just requesting the service principal name. So whenever I set up a service attached to an account, if it requires authentication, then I'll need to set up an SPN or service principal name for it. So with raw PowerShell, you can pretty easily enumerate through the service principal names on the domain, and then find out which accounts are attached to them, and then you can go, okay, is this a computer account? Because most services, or some services, will be on computer accounts which do have strong default passwords, so there are no-go. So you can find specifically services running on user accounts, or you can use so these are GitHub. So if you just search ghost/Rubius, you'll find the GitHub page, and this is the latest and greatest curb roasting framework made in C# by a guy called Harmjoy, who knows a lot about this stuff and has a lot of resources about Kerberos and breaking it and messing with it to attack. And then Nidum has a couple of curb roasting scripts which are quite helpful and don't run in C#. So if you've just got the environment and you just want to run a script, then that's also great. But it's also, it takes a wee while to get working. So assuming we do that and run through it, we've then got, this is what it would look like. So this is the full event, Windows event 4769. But the things you want to pay attention to are the service information up there, so the service name, and then the ticket options, ticket encryption type, and failure code. So obviously, we're not interested in requests for tickets that don't fail. We're interested in specific encryption types there. And I didn't include it in the slide, but I think it's OX17, OX12, and I think that's it. I'm not sure. I'll find that out. And essentially, do you see that? The $sign that the service name ends in means it's associated with a computer account, and that's no good to us. So we need to search for services which don't have that. That's another limiter we can do. So yeah, here's, and also a lot of the if you opt for this. Welcome everyone. If you opt for this logging, a bit late, but it's fine. So a lot of the requests will be for KRB TGT, which is for the ticket granting service. So that's not going to get curb roasted. So we can get that out. We can filter out machine accounts. We can filter out things which fail, and we can look for the ticket encryption type. So this is all still in Windows. This is all still in our environments. If you also want to set up some sort of same type application, we can talk about ELK very quickly. So ELK is the Elastic Stack, which is not its official name. I should really stop using ELK. But essentially, you ingest data with Logstash and Beats.
Cancelled, bro.
Yeah, sorry. So essentially, Beats are if anyone's familiar with Splunk, they're essentially a forwarder. There's a different type for different data, and they've all got different configuration options, which I think is dumb, but it's not about me. And then Logstash takes those logs in and indexes them correctly. And then you can use Elasticsearch, which is a similar to Splunk processing language in which you can search the data, and then Kibana puts it all into lovely dashboards and nice lists for you. And it also allows you to set up similar things to Splunk do, which is scheduled searches and alerts and dashboards and so on. So with this detection, looks something like this. And again, I know it's not very visible, but we can see on the very left, the event ID is 4769. It doesn't end in a $sign. It is not the ticket granting service. I genuinely can't read it. That's another machine name filter. And we know it passed, and we've got the encryption type. So it's quite literally looking at, okay, so that's essentially it. So don't try to work, because there's no real support for ELK. We can use a whole bunch of other ones. Essentially, because I don't work with ELK. I wouldn't ever put money on ELK because it crashes far too much. Essentially, the takeaway, enterprise security is pretty messy, Kerberos is scuffed, and building a lab is a great way to spend your time because it teaches you so much about deep technical concepts that you really have no place to learn anywhere else. Any questions? Hi.
Do you think it's feasible, like, and realistic, in the real world, to solely base your detection on Windows log events? Or do you need other products to?
Well, like ADR products, like OS Query and stuff to monitor.
Yeah, more like looking at processing.
I haven't looked at it, and I'm far too junior to know from experience, but I would definitely say if there was a EDR tool, endpoint detection and response tool, or something similar, which didn't rely on Windows log events and the agent, because my issue with these type of things are the agent to deploy. It takes so long, and like an entire environment, it's probably not worth it. But I think we're out of time. Are we completely out of time for? Okay, so thank you so much for your questions, but and thank you for